Hey, and welcome to the K-Files this morning. Hey, JP.
Good morning, Miss Sandra.
Good to see you. We've got an interesting case to talk about today, as I've already kind of advertised and put out there on the show. But first, I do want to talk about the K-Files a little bit like I normally do. If you're a first-time viewer of this, what we're out to do is solve crimes, solve murders that are unsolved, to give families closure. The number is on the screen, 406-6736. You are the key. You're the key to solving these cases. Somebody out there knows something. If you know something, you have to say something. It's completely anonymous. So please find it in your heart to come forth if you know anything, or if you can remember anything. Oh, well, you know, I do remember this, but I never told them. Please come forth. You can also call 977-1111, and that is the Crime Stoppers number. So, you know, we've been talking, and y'all have heard us talking about the caisson unit with the State Highway Patrol has the caisson unit with the horses that they are used at for fallen officers' funerals and etc. Went to this event that you heard a lot about, the oyster roast, and I have to say I was impressed.
Huge turnout.
Oh my goodness! I mean, we didn't think they had sold that many tickets, did we? But they came out.
I was surprised because we usually do it in November, and this year, with COVID and everything like it is, we decided to do it in February.
Yes.
And I've heard that we are going to do it again in November.
Yes, and I will certainly go. It was a lot of fun. You saw a lot of people that sometimes you don't always see. You got a chance to see your law enforcement and thank them for what they were doing, what they do, and they put this thing on. It was, and you know, somebody said in the parking lot when I got out of my car, I heard somebody saying, they're not going to have any food left. There's no way, because they had seen all the cars and couldn't hardly get a park and all that. So they said, there's not going to be any food left. That was not an issue. No food. I mean, plenty of food. Food did not give out. And you could get a table. What we did was get our table. We sat down, and me and a couple of our friends went too. But we eat shrimp. Me and my friend eat shrimp. And we don't eat a lot of oysters, so that wasn't really something. So we made the guys sit down with us at the table and eat our barbecue and our shrimp. And everything was delicious, I can tell you. And then we all got up and went to the oyster bar and to the oyster table. And by that time, it had cleared out enough that you could. So I've learned the trick to it now. So I didn't get there at 5, I got there at 6.
We got there around 6 o'clock. We took.
You had a class that day, so
did.
you had already been busy that day.
Yeah, I had a concealed carry class earlier that day in Bailey, but when we went, we take a box of crackers because crackers are not available, and we take little bowls. We take Texas, but we take everything just in case it's not available.
Really?
Yes. And,
I didn't think about the crackers.
Yeah.
I didn't see any crackers.
Yeah. So we did that. And I love going because I get to see a lot of guys from one end of North Carolina to the other that I have not seen in years. You get to see a lot of elected officials. You get to see, I saw Gus Tullis, talked to him, hadn't seen him in forever.
Yes, with his hat on.
Yes.
I didn't recognize him.
Yeah, you know, Ricky Parks. A lot of people that I just don't get to see and talk to. So I love going to things like this.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of good food, a lot of good conversation, a lot of retirees, like I say, I had lost track of. A lot of people at the sheriff's office hug Sheriff Stone's neck, talk politics a little bit. He wanted to know how things are south of the river for him. I told him, nothing to worry about.
Absolutely.
But I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah,
I'm
it's a
already
lot of
looking
camaraderie.
forward. It is. Law enforcement is a family. And it's like a family reunion when you go to something like that.
It is.
It really is.
And they had the horses out there. You could look and look at those and see exactly. They had the horse trailer and the fancy horse trailer.
They
It's
had
really
the actual
nice.
caisson unit, it set the case on display,
They did.
and it looks brand new.
It does.
It looks like a museum piece.
They take care of
They
it.
do.
They really take care of it.
There's a lot of pride in that unit.
Yes.
The trucks, the trailers, the horses, they look immaculate, very
Yes.
well kept. You know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm telling you all this to tell you that next time, when it comes back around in November, we'll be talking about it again. You need to get tickets because it's a lot of fun.
It is.
So, anyway, well, today I thought about what case we were going to talk about. We're going to wait and we decided we want to talk about this case. So we're going to put JP off, couldn't say it, JP off a little bit. I know some of you were looking forward to him talking about his concealed carry and giving us some tips and all that, and we're still going to do it. But we want to talk about this case today, and then down the road in a couple of weeks we'll talk about that. We'll give JP an opportunity to go through all that. So the gentleman's name is James Crisp. There he is. Nicest man in the world from what people say, and told Lyndall. They told Lyndall this was the nicest man. And the reason I know is because I had people call me after we talked about this case from Rocky Mount. This is a Wilson case. He owned a record store downtown Wilson that people just loved. Went down there and bought records from Rocky Mount, from everywhere, all over the place. And it was kind of like you could hang out because he would have the records playing. And he had a game table in there, and he just made it fun for people to go hang out. He loved music, loved records and albums. And
He had a familiar look, a kind look about him.
oh yeah, they said he was the kindest man, and they said everybody loved him in the community. So the name of the store was the Super Hits Volume 1 Record Store. Remember that? Well, Lyndall said after we talked about this case, he said, I got more response from this case than any case I've ever wrote about in the paper, talked about on TV. This gave me the best response because so many people knew him. He was such an icon in the community in Wilson. And I'll tell you, Wilson downtown was just thriving big time during that time because this happened October 11th, 1982. That's how long ago it was. And it was a very viable downtown, but drugs started to, back in the day, it was, drugs were rampant, and they are now, but I'm just saying, back in the day, they were, they were bad as well. I mean, we didn't think about back then in the 80s, how bad it was, but drugs were terrible back then too, but back then it was crack. Crack was just everywhere. So anyway, Mr. Crisp was sadly murdered. Some folks, more than one, they know it was more than one person, people went in there and killed James Crisp by tying him up with an extension cord and stabbing him and leaving him laying in a pool of blood. Stabbed 6 times. Now, does this ring a bell? First thing I said to Linda was, wait a minute. I said, tied up with an extension cord. I said, now, that's similar to Jeff Cobb, because I still say an extension cord is not something you go there, bring there. You don't bring it there.
Yeah.
It's something that's so readily available in a business like he would have. So they went in there, tied him up, and this was robbery. It was robbery, just outright robbery. I don't know if they knew that. I don't know if Mr. Crisp had a habit of keeping cash in there, and they knew that, or it was just they thought he might have cash and just hit him up. I don't know. But it was a sad day in downtown Wilson that day, in the whole community of Wilson that day, from what they said. So anyway, people, and they said people came from all around to buy records there. I mean, Rocky Mount, people, because after we talked about the case, I had a lot of people call me from here. Oh, I used to go there all the time. And so it was a very popular store. It was the Super Hits Volume 1 record store. And even, he was so well thought of that Governor Hunt offered a $5,000 reward, which still stands today. So we have a $15,000 reward in the kitty. Well, there's $5,000 more by Governor Hunt, and it's standing until it's solved. So that's $20,000 that could possibly, if someone knew anything, could come forward. But there's several twists in this story. Okay, he was stabbed 6 times, tied up by an extension cord. Robbery was the motive. And the thing was, the bad thing was, there was an arrest. 3 men were arrested for it years later, in 1989. 7 years later, because this happened in 82. So in 89, 7 years later, 3 men were arrested. Well, I'll tell you the story about his wife that Lyndall told several times. She said, I have not slept a night since my husband died.
I'm sure.
For years. I cannot sleep. Well, I think she was probably afraid that they would come after her. So anyway, she said, I just could not sleep at all. And 3 men arrested. She even was quoted in the newspaper. And here's the thing. I tell you what, we're going to go to break because I want to show you this article. The police chief in Wilson at that time, there was an article in the paper, headlines, police chief says crime is solved. Now, we haven't gone to trial yet, okay? We haven't gone to trial. Police chief says crime is solved. So we're going to go to break, and we're going to show you that article. If Brittany can find that article, right after this, we'll show you.
Being prepared and trained is the best way to keep your family safe. The best way to be prepared is to learn from those who've spent a lifetime protecting us. Barnes Safety and Consulting LLC offers concealed carry classes with instructors who are law enforcement officers active and retired with more than 100 years of law enforcement experience. Monthly classes are taught year-round with private classes and special group rates available. Classes are $75 and held in the Bailey area. Call or text 1-800-653-0643. Get your concealed carry permit and avoid becoming a victim.
Okay, and welcome back. We're talking about the James Crisp case, the owner of the Super Hits. That's a long name for a record store, business, whatever. It's a long name. But anyway, find my notes. Super Hits Volume 1 record store was the name of it. And of course, we're going to let you, what we're going to do is let Lyndall, when Lyndall was telling the story, we're going to let you hear that from the beginning, because he actually went and did a stand-up video in front to show you what it looks like now, which doesn't, he said, look anything like the record store looked back in the day. This happened in 1982, October 11th, 1982. So we were just talking about the police chief came out when they arrested the 3 men. Police chief says murder is solved.
Yeah, I think he kind of jumped the gun on that.
He went out on a limb on that one, I would have to say. Now, the chief back then, I'll have to look and see who the chief back then was. That's interesting. Of course, I probably don't know him, but we'll have to see. Lyndall says his name, I'm sure. Okay, Brittany, do you want to share with us the beginning of Lyndall's talk about the James Crisp case?
Hey folks, this is Lindell with the K-Files. I am in downtown Wilson on Goldsboro Street. Right behind me here is where James Crisp operated his record store in the early 1980s. He was murdered during an armed robbery. We're going to be talking about that case today and try to see if we can't develop some leads to help law enforcement. Thanks for tuning in. Of 1982. Front looks like today, so you might not know. That's took that picture the other day. That's what it looks like now, right? So you might not know. We got a picture we're going to show later of what it looked like back then. But that's, if you're in downtown Wilson, that's what the music store looks like now.
Okay.
So the one with the glasses, not the, I don't know what that red wood is or whatever that is.
Okay.
Is that red, brown? I'm colorblind. I don't know.
I think it's brown.
Anyway, it's the one with the glass front right there, storefront right there. So in October 11th of 1982, an employee was coming to work in the morning, and they found the front door open and Mr. Crisp's body in the back of the store in a pool of his own blood. His hands and feet were bound with an extension cord, and he had been stabbed several times, right?
Wow.
So, I'm not on this show for my good looks. I actually know things. Extension cord tells to me, that's a rough way to tie someone up. It's not easy to tie extension cord. It's thick, it's rubbery,
it's not.
right? So, I went to the scene one time where a guy had tried to hang himself. Well, actually, he was very successful in hanging himself with an extension cord from a tree. And I guess he had changed his mind at some point because he tried to cut himself loose and it didn't work.
This reminds me of the Jeff Cobb case in that this is something, you don't take an extension cord to,
Exactly.
a location to kill somebody.
Right, unless you're the extension cord.
Or to tie somebody up.
Unless you're the extension cord killer, you don't.
You find that on location.
Exactly. Just like in the Jeff Cobb case, he was stabbed with a screwdriver.
Yeah.
More than likely a screwdriver from his own garage. Right. So I also covered a investigation of a trial. It was the first murder trial I ever covered, almost 18 years ago. And the guy had picked up a waitress from a restaurant, and he had strangled her to death with an extension cord in his house. And he left her body in the bathroom for 3 days while he went to, and then when the cops finally figured out who it was, and as they were, they were coming down the street, he
and as we said back in the day, that was crack time.
Yeah.
Either inexperience.
They must have been high that day because they left the door open after they killed him as they were leaving. Well, that let people look in there and find him quicker. If you shut the door, he might not be found as quickly and give you time to get wherever you're going, but the fools left the door open.
Yeah, I've got questions on that. Were lights left on?
Right.
Was there a beat officer that was on patrol that night? I'd love to know what time frame do they think this happened.
Right.
So he was found by an employee coming in the next morning. Is that what I just heard him say?
I think so. I think that's what he said, yes, which that part I had forgotten about, yeah.
Yeah, and look, I'm 47 years old. I've never heard of this case, which I would have only been, 8 years old? I love hearing about these cases like this. This is the first time I've ever heard of this case.
And especially, like Jeff Cobb, he was just so high profile. Everybody loved this man. And they said after this happened, Lyndall said he talked to people all around the community, And they said Wilson downtown started going downhill after this happened. It just started going.
Yeah. People are not going to live where they don't feel safe. People are not going to shop where they don't feel safe.
That's
and
right.
people are not going to send their children to school where they don't feel safe. That's
exactly
a fact.
right. Exactly right. All right, we'll go back to Lyndall and hear a little bit more about this case. Well, James Crisp is who we're talking about. He ran the Super Hits Volume 1 record store at 121 South Goldsboro Street in Wilson. On October 11th, 1982, there he is right there. There's a picture. Looks like such a nice man. On October 11th, 1982, an employee found Crisp's body in the store. Crisp had been bound and stabbed 6 times, I believe, Lyndall said.
Yes,
So,
6 times.
sad.
Yeah, a very brutal murder. Okay, so we said that his wife was having trouble sleeping and then that she wanted resolution in the case. Of course, I mean, she
Right,
deserves it.
of course.
3 men were arrested 7 years later, 1989. 3 men are arrested for this, right?
Okay.
They are charged and arrested.
And
Franklin.
more than likely, in a case like that, it's going to be more than one person.
Oh yeah, yeah. The three men, Frederick Lyles, right? He was in Central Prison on a robbery conviction when they arrested him. So he's already locked up for a robbery conviction. Anthony Best, he was on the run at the time, but they arrested him later in Virginia, okay? And O'Neill Rasta Thompson was in prison in South Carolina for aggravated assault.
But they were out.
No, they were in prison.
What? I don't understand.
It's 7 years later, Sandra. They committed crimes in between from the time
gotcha.
that they allegedly
Okay.
from the time that they allegedly killed Mr. Crisp, they went on to commit other crimes.
Of course.
2 of them were arrested and convicted. One of them was locked up in Central Prison in Raleigh.
Okay.
And one of them was locked up in South Carolina.
Okay.
One of them on a robbery charge. One of them on aggravated assault charge.
Okay.
Right? And then one of them
Got
was
it.
on the loose in Virginia, but they caught him later. Right?
Okay.
So that's Frederick Lyles, Anthony Best, O'Neill Rasta Thompson.
Okay.
Okay. So Lyles was 22 in 1982 at the time of Mr. Crisp's murder. He was 29 when he was arrested in 1989, and he's 60 today.
Wow.
Okay. So Best and Thompson were both 23 at the time. So I added up on all my fingers and toes because I'm not very good at math. But if they were 23 at the time, that means that they were 30 when they were arrested, and they're 61 now, right? So we're talking about men that were arrested, and these murders were committed when they were just 22, 23, right?
Right.
They were arrested. Now you know, we have to use words like alleged and supposed and things like
yeah.
that because, you know, there was no conviction, and we'll get into why in a minute. But it is a fact that they were arrested when they were 29. Lyles was 29, and Best and Thompson were 23.
Okay.
So then now they are 60-year-old men. Two of
They
us.
were arrested for this.
They were arrested for this. Right.
But what happened?
Well,
I'm anxious.
we're getting there. Lyles and Best are still around, okay, and we'll get into where Mr. Thompson is, but they're still here, right? So they also Lyles had a extensive criminal conviction history. Now I want people to listen. We're going to have Hope Connie is going to be on here to tell us the legalities of different things, but I
Right.
want people to understand what I'm saying is that when someone's accused of a crime, even by law enforcement, right, you have to be careful that you can't, you have to be really careful about saying that they committed the crime,
Right.
right? But once someone's convicted of it, I mean, that's it, right? They're convicted
Yes.
of it. So
That's right.
Lyles had an extensive criminal career leading into this murder, right? He had already been convicted of a lot of crimes before that. Best was a homeless man. that he was going around from place to place. That's why he was in Virginia. They finally tracked him down. And Thompson was a Haitian immigrant. I can't figure out whether he was legal or illegal, but when we find out what happened to him later, we'll probably figure that out. And he was traveling from town to town. He didn't have homeless is kind of a tricky thing, some people choose, they call it living outdoors.
Right.
I knew a guy that his sister used to get him, pick him up, clean him up, take him home. He'd live with her for a week or two, and then he was like,
right.
That's it for me. I'm going back behind the garage or whatever. So Mr. Thompson was traveling town to town, just doing whatever, right?
Right.
Okay, so when they were arrested, there was a headline in the Wilson Times that she's going to show that pretty much spelled out how the police feel about this case then and how they feel about the case now. So, Brittany, you got the headline? Can you read that? It says, police chief says murder is solved. Right? That's it for them.
How can the murder be solved?
Case. Well, here we go.
They're out on the street.
They're out on the street now because there's a lot between an arrest and a conviction. That's why we don't hang around when Team Cold Case gives out rewards. We don't hang around for the conviction because that could be years.
It could be years and years.
Okay, so Wilson Police Chief Tom Yontz. Am I pronouncing that right? Do you remember him? You been around that long?
No.
You do not remember him?
I don't remember him because I
thought
didn't
you
really
probably
have
used to
that much.
date him or something.
No, I don't have
only murderers.
I didn't know that much about Wilson back then.
Okay, so Yontz has had a distinguished career, right? He was an SBI agent, and just last year he was named the interim police chief at UNC Chapel Hill, right? So I mean he's been around. He's like Chief Williams.
So he was young back then.
Oh yeah. Chief Williams has been around a lot. He's been a police chief a lot of places. So Wilson comes up with some good police chiefs.
They do.
So he was convinced that the murder was solved. He tells the newspaper, that's a pretty bold statement for them to make. The murder is solved. Chris' wife told the newspaper at the time that she said there was a time, and she's talking about that 7 years between 82 and 89, right? She says there was a time when I didn't believe that they would ever find out who did it, right? I'm so glad I was wrong. Right. So when she talks to the newspaper, in '89, she's relieved. Remember, we talked about 7 years of insomnia and not being able to sleep.
Yes.
Right. So she's relieved in '89 that there's been an arrest in this case. So Chris' daughter, Sharon Eatman, she tells the newspaper that it won't be over till the three men go to trial. Right? So she knew what she was talking about because we don't get to trial. Right? The case never goes to trial. And
why?
I'll tell you why in a minute. So I just want folks to get a grasp on this, right? That Mr. Crisp is a longtime businessman in Wilson, one of the most respected people there. Everybody loved him. I didn't hear anything about him. He's a family man, got a lot of kids, goes to work every day. He's doing what he's supposed to do. Right. Allegedly, 3 guys wanting drug money. Okay, so Wilson Police Chief Tom Yontz. Am I pronouncing that right? Do you remember him? You been around that long?
No.
You do not remember him?
I don't remember him because I didn't really have that much.
I thought you probably used to date him or something.
No, I don't have
only murderers?
I didn't know that much about Wilson back then.
Okay, so Yontz has had a distinguished career, right? He was an SBI agent.
There you go. Okay, so they did not even go to trial. And later on, we find out from Lyndall that the reason they didn't go to trial was because the DA, and at that time the assistant DA was handling the case, and that was went on to later be Judge Covelo. I know y'all know John Covelo. John Covelo was assistant DA, and the answer he gave to the reporters when they interviewed him, why, what happened, and he said, lack of evidence. The evidence was just not there. Because there was a witness that they were counting on to testify, and they changed their mind.
And out the window it goes.
Out the window it goes. And they could not place them. There was a report from a citizen that reported 3 men running down the street in front of the record store about that time.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to place them in the store, almost.
And in a case like this, you've almost got to create a scenario where you pit one against the other.
Yeah.
That's how you would bring something like this to trial. Is offer one of them a deal.
Exactly. So, I don't know. But all I know is it never made it. And I understand that the investigators at the police department, Lyndall said, were very, very upset.
I'm sure.
Because they brought what they thought was, they brought the guy, the witness, all of that. Didn't witness, changed his mind, won't do it. So this happens so many times.
It really does. You
so
just
many
find out
times.
about it when it's a high-profile case.
Do they get scared? Yes, sometimes, absolutely. Do they were they lying to start with?
That's right.
There was a third witness that said he knew what happened and knew they were there at the record store. He was a convict. They said that is not, the DA would not accept his,
Credibility.
no credibility.
That's right.
So everything just unfolded and just went the heck in a handbasket. So anyway, so to speak. So anyway, we'll be back. We'll talk about weather right after this.
Being prepared and trained is the best way to keep your family safe. The best way to be prepared is to learn from those who've spent a lifetime protecting us. Barnes Safety and Consulting LLC offers concealed carry classes with instructors who are law enforcement officers active and retired with more than 100 years of law enforcement experience. Monthly classes are taught year-round with private classes and special group rates available. Classes are $75 and held in the Bailey area. Call or text 1-800-653-0643. Get your concealed carry permit and avoid becoming a victim.
Okay, and welcome back. Well, JP and I have had some back and forth on this case. So what do you think?
Just on its surface,
So there's
naturally
6
I would think there was the 3 guys are the perpetrators.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's just my gut,
Yeah.
And I know absolutely nothing about it other than what I was just told. I think they had the right guys. Somebody changed their story. There was a credibility issue. And, it's like the DA said, I can't take this to trial. And, at that point, what do you do?
Well, I said later on the show, I was watching what Lyndall and I put out on the story, and I said, and I still stick by that, if you go to trial, you stand a chance. If you don't go to trial, you get nothing.
But
you know you don't stand a chance.
But you run the risk of not guilty. And knowing full well that these are the guys that probably did it. And then if you were to get another piece of evidence 6 months from now or a year from now, it's over. The game's over.
You've already got a not guilty.
And you can never bring charges again. They could stand up in court and say, yeah, we did it, and there's nothing you could do about it if they were found not guilty.
And that's a point. Now that's a very good point that I didn't really think about when I said that. Wow. Well, you know, law enforcement works very hard. And I've heard this story many times when Sheriff Stone has been on here. Many times he has said, you know, we work very hard to go after these people. And, you know, they risk their lives on some of these cases.
And we want to get it right.
Yes.
The last thing I would ever want to be a part of is feeling like I sent somebody to prison only to find out years later I was wearing blinders and I was part of something that sent an innocent person to prison. You know, we don't have the best judicial system in the world, or a perfect one, but I think we've got the best one. You know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But you know, he would say, just to find out they're out on this little bitty bond, or this, you know, whatever. I mean, it's very frustrating for law enforcement, though, to go through this, and then, you know, and I'm not just talking about murders. I'm just talking
Anything.
about crimes in general. You know, so when you elect your DAs, you've got to think about these things. I mean, you know, when election comes up for DA, you really got to think. But anyway, but the DA does have to have the evidence. You've got to have enough evidence to take it to trial. And when witnesses back out, that's just the ultimate terrible thing.
Especially if you built your entire case around one person's testimony.
Yes.
You know, if that's the case and they renege or they change their story, it's over.
Yeah.
It's over.
Absolutely. And see, these guys are now in their 60s. Well, we know that the Haitian guy, he
Was deported.
So, as Lyndall said, he's probably over laying on the beach drinking mimosas today. So that's kind of how he referred to it. Well, so he's just scot-free. The other two, they're probably in prison for something else, because they just were career criminals. They just kept on and on and on. So,
and odds are, I guarantee you, if they did perpetrate this crime, they've bragged about it. They've talked about it to family members, friends. They've tried to get credit for it in their circle of friends.
That's right.
If they did it, there's people in that community that know they did it, or there's people in that community who know who did it.
Yes.
You know.
Exactly.
This case can be solved.
It can be solved. And even if you do say, okay, one of them is in prison and you know that, it doesn't matter. The family needs closure. And you know, bless her heart, his wife may be gone on now, but he's got a daughter, we know that. He has other family, we know that. So they would like to know. They would like to know. So help bring closure by calling this number, 406-6736, if you know anything, because as JP said, somebody has talked to somebody.
Guarantee it.
You may be an older person now, and you may be thinking, I need to just go ahead and do this. It's been long enough. I need to just go ahead and do this.
Clear my heart.
Yes,
Clear my soul.
absolutely. So we would love to solve this crime. We would love to have this crime solved. We really would. So anyway, next week, you remember the case. We're going to go over this next week because we haven't. The case in Halifax County, the quadruple murder. Sad, sad case where the couple were just simply in their home playing cards. And home invasion. And were all four murdered. And 3 people went to prison. And 2 were let out. The DA let 2 of them go. Here's another case where the third guy, or witness, but this witness was in prison with them. This person, one of the 3, decided that he was going to change his story. So, so does that mean so they've let the other two out, and I guess he's still in there. But does this mean that he ratted them out?
It means some dynamic has changed. I don't know the details. They were they in prison or jail? Has there been a trial? I was under the impression there had not been a trial
Maybe there
yet.
has not been a trial.
Okay.
We need to give you all those details next week. We'll go through that next week because there may be another development in that story. We're not sure at this point. We're going to let you know next week if there's been another development in the story.
But it sounds like to me a dynamic has changed.
Yes.
That persuaded the DA to release two.
Yes.
Of the suspects.
They said the other person, changed his story. So I'm just wondering if he told who they were, that they were with him to start with. If he told them to start with, and he might have got scared. But why did he get scared all of a sudden? Why wasn't he scared to start with? So I don't know. We'll talk about that story because that story is very close to home, and we have not talked a whole lot about Halifax County cases. So that's one in Halifax County that we do need to, and we're not just Rocky Mount. I mean, we are the region. We're talking about regional murder cases because the case we talked about this morning, as a matter of fact, we talked quite a bit about Wilson, because we've talked about the quadruple, we've talked about Tammy, two Tammys in Wilson. So we talked a lot about Wilson, but we're going to talk more about this case probably, and go back to Jeff Cobb. I think Lieutenant Seifman said he would discuss that when he comes for his rotation. Next week we'll have Jeff Sherrod. As far as we know, Lieutenant Sherrod will be here unless he has an assignment. Sometimes that does happen. So look forward to having him on next week to see what cases he wants to talk about. And, I'll have to say, you'll probably talk about all of them because Nash County does not have a lot of cases, which is great. So anyway, and then we'll give you some more details on the Halifax County quadruple murder next week too. So, okay. Well, JP, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Enjoyed it, absolutely. And we'll see you back next week on the K-Files.
Being prepared and trained is the best way to keep your family safe. The best way to be prepared is to learn from those who've spent a lifetime protecting us. Barnes Safety and Consulting LLC offers concealed carry classes with instructors who are law enforcement officers active and retired with more than 100 years of law enforcement experience. Monthly classes are taught year-round with private classes and special group rates available. Classes are $75 and held in the Bailey area. Call or text 1-800-653-0643. Get your concealed carry permit and avoid becoming a victim.